So this is the Vedanta Series question and answers. This is different from our Wednesday sessions in as much as the Wednesday sessions are described as spiritual seekers question and answer. And I suppose in a sense there are no real differences. But still, in terms of the Vedanta philosophy, these are questions more oriented toward that. But they do involve, of course, the practical application also. And so we hope to have some questions here and suitable answers. By now, you know the introductory peace prayer, and so let us repeat it together. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunuktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vittishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one nourish us, may that one protect us, may we work together with great energy, and may our study be illumined, may we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So as usual, I'll mute the microphone just to receive any questions.
Swamiji, one question.
Yes.
So I see a lot of people here who are very honest, but they are self-declared atheists. They don't want to have anything to do with God. And on the other hand, during the India trip, I saw a lot of people who will do a lot of austerities. They will go to the temple every day, and they will do all the religious pilgrimages and all that. But their dealings with others are very dishonest. It's based on deception. It's based on lies. So I was wondering who is better of the two. I don't know if this is a question that you want to take, but that's the
question. So who's better than these? You are, is a simple answer. You see, the problem with the whole concept of religion is that religion has a very bad reputation in, let us say, Western countries. That means Europe, United States of America, less so. Australia, Scandinavian countries have pretty much done away with formal religion. That doesn't mean to say that religion does not exist. So what we mean by religion, we have to find out what that definition is. I pointed out in a number of talks, the English word religion comes from two roots, religere and religio. Religere really is to do with to read again. Religio, on the other hand, is a set of boundary marks that restrict your movement in a disciplined life. All spiritual practice really is built on duality. And the worshipper and the worshipped are distinct from each other. The meditator, the object of meditation, different, separate. The person performing ritualistic worship and the God that is being worshipped are different. And so it's a necessary component of what we call religion. So I remind you really of how Swami Vivekananda, in a very, very short, brief part of a commentary he makes in Raja Yoga. And he starts off with this broad statement, each soul is potentially divine. Now I know this is repetition for us, but it is worth taking note of this, how he's viewing this subject of religion. In another place, he's telling us, by definition, religion is realization. If we take it in this way, we have a completely different view. That means that all of this dualistic worship that starts off will have to culminate in an opening and a widening of our understanding eventually. And teachers, religious teachers, scriptures, wise people know sufficiently that you cannot give the same medicine to every patient. And I'm putting this in Buddhistic terms. We're all suffering. We don't highlight that we're all suffering, but when you analyze it properly, as Gautama Siddhartha did, who became Buddha, you'll discover, yes, actually, we're trying desperately to maneuver around suffering. We're shaping our life in such a way that we want to avoid pain and suffering. It's like an obstacle course, or like going into a new place. You get up in the dark, you don't realize there's a table somewhere, there's a chair somewhere. As soon as you are familiar with these obstacles, you take every measure to go around the obstacles. But there's another method. Why don't you switch a light on? If you switch a light on, light representing internal wisdom, see, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness to light. Tamaso, jyotir, kamaya, lead us from the darkness to the light. So it's a symbology of knowledge. We all require knowledge. We have no option. Knowledge is the one thing that we have to gain. But the mistake is that it's not intellectual object of knowledge. Katha Upanishad is very clear. You won't get it through the intellect. You'll only get a revelation really by whoever the Atman or the self chooses to reveal. And you can put this in theistic language if you like. So, relicere really means to read again, to study again all the evidence that there is some supreme entity, some supreme principle. And when we discover it in ourselves, then we have now gotten around the pain. We have learned to switch the light on. We no longer bang into a table, into a chair and guess. All our life, therefore, is structured that begins with a structure of how can we survive? How can we identify the obstacles and get around them as best we can? Knowing that we will bang our knees and bang our feet in the darkness. Still, we have no choice. We are born. We didn't say, let me be born. We are born. And we will die also. We didn't say, I don't wish to die. Let it never happen. Pray to God. May I be immortal. But that's our secret wish. Immortality is our secret wish. And immortality can be couched in religious language as a paradise, a heaven, a post-mortem condition, only because we're hanging on to a duality of concept. So all of these relationships that are established in dualistic worship, behind is a possibility of purifying the internal apparatus. So all this temple worship in India and other places in the world, of course, churches, temples, mosques, 5 times a day Muslims are praying, can be done in one of 2 ways. Because the psychological condition could be, I have to do this, it's my duty, my parents did it, and if I don't do this, it'll be bad luck on me. And when I do this, I can pray to the Lord, give me prosperity, don't let me fall sick, don't let my family fall sick. Dying, we have no choice. We can't say, don't let me die, but that's our secret wish. So our human condition sets up religion often because we're in trouble. Bhagavad Gita mentions this. There are several types of worshippers. One, you are desperate. You are absolutely desperate. You have no choice. You know that any amount of human endeavor cannot take you out of a crisis. In desperation, you appeal to a transcendent being that knows better, that can handle things, created the universe. That regal ruler alone can solve my problem. So that's the one approach. Another approach would be, well, my life is good, but may it be better. Another approach may be, let me get more knowledge, more intellectual understanding. But the best of all, of course, is worshipping for the sake of worshipping. So it's the same question, really. On Valentine's Day, St. Valentine's Day, it's the custom to give your most beloved a token. It may be flowers. Flower shops make roaring trade on these days, accompanied by a card, which normally has some kind of poetry within it. Poetry is seen to be the language of romance. Now, I remember one person in Ireland saying to me, this curious customer of St. Valentine's Day, are you going to buy flowers and something for your wife? He says, no, for me, every day should be Valentine's Day. And that's how we managed to be married for some 50 years. Yeah, that's a good answer, of course. Every day should be Valentine's Day. So when you give flowers to your most beloved on this special day, is it because you don't want to get into trouble? Is it because it is the custom, and what will anybody think about you if you never did it? Is it that you want some extra favor? What is it? Or is it that you simply love the person and just want to give flowers, regardless of whether they themselves give you anything in return? So there are varying degrees of this love which is necessary in this worship. And some of it is not done with love at all. Some of it is done as a bargaining process. And so therefore we cannot generalize. We cannot generalize by saying, those people who I see are very diligent in their temple worship, are they better than those people who say, I don't really believe in God, but I'm a good person? Or those people who study Vedanta and say, we don't believe in an extra cosmic God as we used to in a dualistic way, but we do understand the value of dualistic worship because it cleans the mind. And we understand that as devotees, we can have a real close connection to that expression of the infinite, which comes out to us as a chosen ideal. For those of keener understanding, we can do away with all of that. To those of keen understanding, we can say, let's forget about this God. Let us focus on what is the reality. That is, what is the thing that never changes? So Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya, was a great proponent of the non-dualistic system. Adi Shankaracharya, he was probably the most famous and is the most famous proponent of Advaita Vedanta. Theoretically, there's no requirement for a God, and yet in all the 4 maths that he created in India, in the 4 corners of India, I'm told that worship carries on until midday. But if you're non-dualistic tradition, why would you worship? But these people, they want to understand the necessity of dualistic worship as a means of cleaning the mind, as a valid means of cleaning the mind and getting the revelation from within. For those people who want a different approach, you see, this dualistic worship only comes into the dualistic aspect of the Vedanta philosophy. In the Sankhya philosophy, you don't have it. In the yoga philosophy, you barely have it. In the Mimamsa, it's not so important. Vaisheshika is not so important. In Mimamsa, ritualism is much more important. In the Vedanta philosophy, we get this dualistic aspect. In Sankhya philosophy, you have dualism also, but not worship. And in yoga, as practiced, the emphasis is not on dualistic worship. The emphasis is on an internal pilgrimage through meditation. And that can be theistic and it can be atheistic. It doesn't have to have a God. So from the philosophical point of view, there's no absolute requirement for a God. In both cases, whether we believe in God or not, we have to see the self. See the self in all beings, and all beings in the self is the one dictum that summarizes the whole practical aspect of the Vedanta. And on this basis, Swami Vivekananda goes ahead and encourages people into karma yoga. Please uplift humanity. Why would you do this? Why don't you just dismiss it? It's all one being. No. When you see within the duality this non-dual aspect, then it gives an extra value, extra dimension to the human condition and the human life. And then that mobilizes you into action. So we can make the unity behind this universe an object of our awareness, even though we can be dualistic in our approach. That is, the intellect can be trained to understand this unity, and the emotions need to rally around and catch up to it. And so bhakti yoga, worship, ritualistic, all of these things are a means to rally the emotions around to understand that unity of existence. Now, if the emotions are not rallied around authentically, we can do all the temple worship we like and still be cruel, unkind, uncharitable to others. We can still react to others in a hostile way or an angry way, because we only saw God in the temple. We never saw God in the living temple made from flesh and blood. We only saw it in the temple made from bricks and mortar. And therefore, the fundamentals of religion has not been explored. In these days, there's a request more and more. I've now done puja many times now for people requesting a program. And these people, they know nothing really about puja per se, but they realize that maybe it's a good thing to do. And so when I do the puja, I'm trying to explain every step of the way. That's my method of doing puja. Those who have seen me do the puja will know I do that. When I do Kali Puja in London, and when I used to do Kali Puja in Ireland, and when I used to do the puja for Ramakrishna Jayanti, these were the two occasions when I did puja, I didn't just do it. I made every effort to explain to Hindus and non-Hindus alike. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Because often Hindus themselves don't know. And those who are non-Hindus definitely don't know. Some of them are very allergic to the whole idea of puja. But you see, puja is a meditation. Temple worship should be a meditation. Doing the salat, if you are a Muslim, should be a meditation. Going into church, putting your hand in the holy water, crossing yourself, entering into church should be puja. Attending, for Irish Catholics, attending Mass or any Catholics throughout the world, it is equivalent to a meditation. It culminates in a communion. That is, you can view it as a mystic union, an opportunity for profound meditation. And all ritualistic worship has this capacity to end itself in profound meditation. Let us take temple worship, for example, that when you go in a perambulation around the central garbha, the garbha is not seen. The courtyard alone is seen. You go through Gopuram, a gateway. That is, symbolically, as you go through, after suitably bathing, purifying the body, you're now prepared to go and do something sacred. In South India, only 2 pieces of cloth are permitted, maybe sometimes even 1 piece of cloth. I think it's 2 actually, lower part and upper part, finished. And this cannot be sewn in any way. And you enter into the temple as a man, for example, and you go in with a certain mindset. You're now going to visit the Lord of the universe who sits within. But we can't forget that every temple, living temple, every human that visits us is also the temple of the Lord, and also has to be seen in this way, and is also an opportunity for worship. When this is forgotten, when there's a divorce between ritualistic worship and common everyday worship of every human being that we encounter, seeing that self. Now, it's only in the Bhagavad Gita that the term Atman, this self, is personalized. Me. Krishna says me. When you see me. So the Upanishads use the phrase self. The meaning internal self, self at depth, meaning that profound aspect within us that cannot be described. But when experienced, there is a unity of existence. And when we experience it, we cannot help but see that unity everywhere. Unity is unity after all, not diversity. So when the eyes look upon all these different names and forms, our discriminative faculty will have to, at least in principle, understand that there is a self within. And then we have to go a little bit more profound, that it is flowing through, that it is as, it is the only existence, and also the possibility of beyond as well. So all of these steps are to be taken, and it depends where you are. If you are at a point whereby God is somewhere else and I'm here and I'm reliant on God, fine, good. Then this act of worship purifies the mind a little bit more, and you realize, a more intimate connection. And all because you have clarified the mind much more. And all of these steps are ways of rallying the emotions round to the principle. But let's catch the principle first. Why do we hold classes on Vedanta? So that you can at least intellectually understand the position of unity everywhere. The highest conclusion in the Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, there's a non-dualistic position. There's only one thing. It's not monistic. We don't even include numbers. We don't get into numerology. We say there's an absence of two. There's an absence of anything other than this one. And that is, we don't have to experience that. We understand it in principle, using logic, using scriptural injunctions, using the authority of teachers of revelation. With all of these combined, with our own internal reasoning, with our own scriptural wealth, the armory that is contained there, the armory called scripture that contains all these truths, the experience of the wise people, the sages, with all of these things, at least we can understand intellectually the principles. Then we have to, the rest, the practice part of it, is then to rally the emotions around more and more and more until it becomes a real understanding. And that is the whole of religion. So coming back then to Swami Vivekananda's two statements, religion is realization. Religion is not, therefore, if you use this definition, it is not doing so many ritualistic activities, making sure that all the ritualistic components that you take to a temple are there, making sure that you are dressed appropriately for the temple, making sure that you make the appropriate salutations, making sure that you are not just visiting the temple because of superstitious reasons or the fact that it is required of you in any way. It's the responsible thing to do. It is your duty. All of these things have to be set aside completely. What is our supreme example in modern times of this? Ramakrishna Paramahansa, as a Brahmin, as a priest, taking charge now of the Mother Kali, the image there, and eventually so many complaints against him. He's not following the traditional ritualistic worship. Instead of offering food to the deity, he looks at the dog, mother, there you are, and feeds the dog. He's weeping. He's grinding his head on the floor. He is laughing. He is weeping. What kind of Brahmin is this? Not following any religious, and yet he was extremely orthodox in the beginning. His orthodoxy prevented him from even participating in priestly activity because of the issue of caste. Anyway, you see, you can see even in the background to this, the difference between this ritualism and honest expression. It all begins with Rani Rasmani, Rani Queen, but she was a very low caste, fisherwoman caste. And Vyasa also was within that caste system, the greatest rishi of all. And so she's inspired. She has a vision. Mother Kali, in her benign aspect, said, please, I want you to build a temple. She builds a temple with due faith. She's a wealthy woman. The next thing, you can't get any priest. No Brahmin will attend because she's a low-caste woman. Following this so-called religious thinking, which is a low thinking, discriminatory thinking, obvious to anybody. And other than those people who are so attached to the letter of the law. And so she gets around the problem. She registers the temple in the Divine Mother's name. This is Kali's temple. Now I'm out of the equation. Okay. Now we can go and do service there, consider it as a proper authorized temple and so on, so all of those things. And that orthodoxy continues when Swami Vivekananda comes back to India after going over the seas. He's not even allowed to go back into Dakshinaswar. He's barred from this temple where his master sat, where he sat, where all these divine revelations took place. Completely barred. Why? You went over the seas. You're not orthodox. You mixed with the dirty Mlecha foreigner. We can't let you in. So there is always this antagonistic mutual position between ritualism or ritualistic orthodoxy on the one hand, and on the other hand, this real authentic connection in spiritual life that reiterates Swami Vivekananda's statement, religion is realization, and his statement, each soul is potentially divine. The goal, you start off with a statement of principle. The goal is to manifest this from within. Now, how do we do this? We do this, although he says, thus controlling nature, internal and external. He is describing the means. You have to control nature. What nature? Your own psychological nature and also nature around you. You can dominate nature. You have the capacity to do it and assert yourself. It's in your favor. You have to advance the condition of humanity. You can control every aspect of nature, more or less. And we have done it indirectly by creating a pollution. We have done it by damaging the environment. We have contributed significantly, so the experts say, to the climate change, man-made. There are some who disagree and say, actually, there's an easy solution. If mankind plant, I forget how many it is, I think maybe, let's say 3 trillion or something, so many trillion, or a trillion, let's say, a trillion fast-growing trees, you'll have solved your problem. And I think that's a good solution. Never mind. You see, our actions have an impact. So we are controlling nature. We didn't want to do it, but we tried to do it on our own local level from the Industrial Revolution on, making life easier for us. And at my age, I can tell you, life is much more luxurious, much more convenient than when I was a child. And we didn't have, see the amazing progress has been made in such a short period of time. We didn't have mobile phones. Computer technology was not available to us. And today it's a matter of a little fun, people with a sense of humor who say, oh, you're struggling with this technological issue. So Swamiji, why don't you give it to a 5-year-old They'll sort out your problem instantaneously. And that is true. So see, all this rapid progress has been made. We have learned to control nature, for better or worse, externally, but internally not so good. And the whole of religion, therefore, is to control nature internal, our own thought currents. That's the important thing. How we do it, that's an individual thing. Whether we offer, as Sri Krishna says, in a simple way, with a sincere heart, a flower, a leaf, some water. That's all that's required. So it's not the action that you do, it is what is the thought movement behind it. And are you rallying successfully the emotions around? And don't judge people for where they are. What you require is dualistic worship, fine. For others, you don't require it. Where are you standing? The point is, the principle is the same. And so Swami Vivekananda goes on to say, controlling nature, internal and external. How do we do this? We're going to do this by, and then he goes on to the means. By work. What does he mean by work? By selfless work. Not requiring or desiring the fruits of our activities. This is a means that we all have to do, because in this modern world, you have no choice. When I was small, women stayed in the household and looked after the home. In modern Western society, women work. Men work and women work. They have a double income. And that's the fact of it. So the whole social environment has had to change. What to do with the children as we are working? Will they get the same nurturing that we used to give when the woman was purely dedicated to the upbringing of the child? There's an economic necessity, perhaps, to sustain a certain lifestyle for two incomes to come in. And the long-term effect will be for the benefit of the child or the children, because we can afford a university education and so on and so forth. There are pluses and minuses to it. There are emotional minuses to it, and there are material pluses to it. And then children in Ireland, if you ask, let's have a class on a Saturday for children, they I would love to do that. But you see, my son and my daughter, he has to go to judo lessons and she has to go to football. And then they both have to go to music. And then they have to do this and that and the other. Their whole time is occupied on a Saturday and Sunday, and then it's back to school. So work is a necessity in this day and age, no doubt. An economic necessity. And any necessity has to be transformed, because if we take it seriously that each soul is potentially divine and our goal is to manifest it from within, any activity that is not doing this is a waste. If this is truly our goal and there's only one central goal, any other activity would be a waste. So that, and worship, in other words, rallying the emotions round, and this is the most common practice. Worship taking the form of temple worship, worshipping at home, other such things. All of this is deemed a necessity. And then psychic control, what does that mean? Meditation. Meditation is completely neutral about whether there's a God, whether there's not God. You can meditate, it doesn't have to have a God. But theistic meditation combined with worship is a very sweet and beautiful thing, and probably suitable for most people. But it's a kind of journey taking any element that you like, the gross form of something, and seeing its finer aspect, until you come to its reality. This is really what meditation is about, and that path is about. And it requires discrimination, it requires discernment. I always remember now, you see the passage, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There's a background to the story, but anyway, King Janaka, himself a realized soul and a karma yogi, he asks Yajnavalkya, Please tell me, what is that light by which people work and walk and go out and sit and all these activities? What is that light? And Yajnavalkya answers, it's the sun. So you may think that's a funny and obvious answer. And Janaka says, okay, when the sun is gone, then what? Well, then it's the stars or the moon. And so it goes on. You take something and then take something more subtle. Then take something more subtle. See, when the sun is gone, moon is gone, stars are gone, fire is gone, when there's nothing now to guide the eyes, what is that by which somebody sees? Well, you see, it is that inner internal world, because we see in dreams. And when those dreams are gone, what is that light by which we see? And then we come to a causal aspect of ourselves. And then when even that is gone, what is that? It's the light of the self. This is meditation. It goes from the grossest point to the more subtle, the more subtle, more subtle. If we don't catch that, we'll make fun of it. He could have said it from the start, by the light of the self. Simple. No, a good teacher leads you progressively, inwardly. And so this is what religion does. It says, hey, come on, construct a beautiful temple. And look at all the components necessary to build such a temple. What do we require? First of all, require a resolve, a communal resolve. Because we need community cooperation. We need funding. We need architects. We need planners. We need the skills. When you look at some of the beautiful, beautiful temples in India, and when you see some of the great Gothic cathedrals in Europe, you see what tremendous engineering skills were necessary and how many years it took to build. Hundreds and hundreds of years. St. Peter's in Rome took several hundred years to build. Some other place, I forget now, took something like 600 years to build. So yes, okay, it's going to take this amount of time to build something. Why? What inspires somebody to do it? You have to employ the most famous and most gifted artists, painters, sculptors. And where will they get the stone? You have to have workers that bring the stone in from vast distances. And then you have to have sufficient engineering skills to make sure that everything is constructed so it doesn't fall down. If we take, for example, Angkor Wat, there's no mortar between the stones. The stones are exactly eroded sufficiently through grinding techniques so that one stone fits exactly on the other and supports the other. Let's take the Roman arches, how they're built in such a way they don't collapse. They're all self-supporting. So great engineering feats are required. Just for what? So that people can come and be inspired, so that people can express their emotional life. And even if it is a petitional kind, save me from this, save me from that, still it provides a valuable need for humanity. To generalize and say, these people, they go to the church, the temple, the mosque, but essentially in their own life, in the rest of the hours of their day, they're not good people. Or to say there are people who don't go to those places at all and they're good people. These generalizations we have to avoid. So I'm just giving you general answers here. But we have to continuously serve to elevate the mind. And the classical Indian, South Indian temples are constructed so that we take a meditative journey. We go from the outer courtyard to the inner one. You see, same stones are there, same building, only one building is there. But to discover the subtler and subtler dimensions until finally you get to the inner Garbha. And the Lord of the universe is only maybe 3 foot high. In the Upanishadic language, the self is in the cave of the heart, the size of a thumb. But don't think that it's restricted in a way. It's useful to think of it for meditation purposes. Imagine now the heart there, the inner core of your own being. Even if you can't imagine it, you can certainly feel it. More subtler than the heart, more subtler than the heartbeat. And there in the dark cave of the heart, a shining light, a luminous being there, sitting there, beaming, of the size of a thumb like a column. We can easily imagine it. Then our imagination can increase the intensity of the light and increase the feeling that it gives, and understand that this light is not only light, it is also bliss and gives us a joyful feeling. And if we can see it in our own temple made from flesh and blood, we can surely see it in every temple made from flesh and blood called a person, a living boy, a living being, a living body. That doesn't prevent us from having this non-dual aspect in the background continuously, understanding intellectually this unity of existence. The rest, what we call religion, is catching the emotions up nicely to it. So these are some answers, in terms of what is the value of religious worship. The ancient sages didn't really require it, but they weren't living in this modern era of distractions. And so the ancient rishis could declare boldly that we can go to the highest point, and our practice is one of meditation, combining therefore the principle of meditation and the practice of jnana, which is the practice of constant viveka, discernment, and vairagya, detachment. Detachment comes from it. If I realize that my living world in which I'm operating is actually not a permanent entity, it is not a good investment to invest in something that doesn't last very long. Much better to invest in something that is enduring, that lasts forever, that is absolutely infinite. And just that simple process, now how do we do it? Well, what is permanent? Let us see it. And when we see it, we see it in all. And we come back to the words of the Bhagavad Gita saying, oh, actually, you are then, when you realize it, somebody of steady wisdom, sthita prajna. You have transcended the three evolutionary forces of nature. You've gone triguna, you are trigunatita. And what is your behavior? Working for the welfare of all beings will be your behavior. Because this is where you'll see this unity of existence everywhere. That is religion. That is a realization, not only in yourself, but in everything else and everywhere else. That's religion. And that can be got from this religare and religio, both origins of religion can be put. Today it's not popular to use the term religion. Today it's not popular to use the term God in academic circles. In countries, particularly, for example, in France, where a revolution took place, several revolutions took place, where the nobility and the religious figures, those leaders in religion, who were all out of touch with the common people and their needs. And so therefore, this elitism of the royalty and nobility and of their clerics, and therefore the church, was seen to be the same thing, regardless of the great cathedrals that are built. They were built for the nobility and elite, after all. Are they not magnificent structures equal to palatial structures for secular use and enjoyment? In Russia, when there was a revolution there, same thing happened. The church was identified with the royalty. And therefore, you see, anti-religious sentiment took place. In Ireland, what has happened? In Ireland, what has happened is the foundation, one of the cornerstones of the Irish Revolution one of the cornerstones of Irish society, the cultural cornerstones that everybody constantly recognizes, is now pretty much gone. I come from Zimbabwe in Africa, you know this. Many Christian missionaries who came to Africa and came to my part of the world, who came from Ireland. They were all trained at colleges such as Maynooth and All Hallows and all of these other institutions. And these institutions now are dedicated to other things because they're not being used. All Hallows is a great college, useful for training missionaries to send to Africa and Asia and South America. What has become of them? So All Hallows is now a branch of the Dublin City University. They had to sell it off. What became of these great institutions where Ireland sent missionaries all over the world, following a tradition going back to the early Irish missionaries, the early Irish Christians who really staunchly revived Christianity in Europe itself, the land of saints and scholars? What has become of this land? Well, history moves on, events move on, things change, but a radical change like this, because of a number of different components, one of which would be global. Much more technology has produced much more interest in gadgets, and the technological interest, which we can summarize as entertainment or taking the senses into another realm, that has taken us away from more serious internal pursuits. And so that's a common difficulty. Globally, it's a common difficulty. And wherever you have more socially liberal ideas coming into fashion, that now, because of the closeness and quickness of media, spreads globally, so that our old values which were there have now completely changed. Let's take the institution of formal marriage. Culturally, with most cultures, it is there. And now legislation enables some different kind of arrangements. And as long as this liberal thinking goes on, a more liberal approach to things, in other words, challenging the older values, because maybe the older values were not reasonable. But on the other side, those who don't use reason at all, the traditionalists, the orthodox, you'll find a backlash from them. And this is nothing new in history. In history, this happens all the time. Jesus was a revolutionary. He was prepared to challenge the orthodox things, if we are to take the accounts to be true, to challenge all the orthodox positions, and to emphasize is not the letter of the law, whether you lift your hand on a Sunday or not, or a Saturday, the Sabbath, or not. We shouldn't be concerned with that. We should be concerned with the kingdom of heaven within you. And so throughout people's lives, you'll see this, throughout history, human lives, you'll see it. Buddha challenged the orthodoxy of his time. This animal sacrifice. Well, instead of sacrificing the best animal you can think of, why don't you sacrifice me? You think I'm so perfect and wonderful and great, and I'm the best sacrifice. Why don't you do that? Human sacrifice. Oh, abhorrent. You can't go back to that. That is a terrible thing. So barbaric. So we should be always in a position to challenge. Particularly, we should challenge orthodoxy, fixed structures. We should at least ask for some reasoning. Tell me why. And modern day liberalism is not immune from superstitions. They just have different superstitions, other superstitions. That's all. So superstition is an easy way out. And many people say this, there's a consensus about it, or seems to be. Therefore, let us join the consensus. Let's not challenge it. Let's go along with it. No, we're entitled to at least ask, please tell me why. When people say, oh, in ritualism, why should we do this? Or we have to do this, we have to do that. Okay, why? What is the reasoning behind it? Can you tell me, please? They say this. They seem to be a great authority in modern life. I have no idea who they are. But anyway, they have many opinions about many different things. And automatically it's taken, it must be true, because they say it. There must be a hierarchy of wise people, anonymous people, who declare many, many things. And so they say this and they say that. Well, who are these they people? And why? More importantly, why are they saying it? This is why Swami Vivekananda's approach is unique and is different. Not unique in the ancient way of teaching. The ancient way of teaching and understanding philosophy in India, these questions were raised. You see, there became a great revivalist movement in the Middle Ages in India, a great revival of bhakti. In fact, you may even say a pioneering movement in bhakti. And that took off because Buddhism never supplied it in India. They supplied meditation, they supplied an element of metaphysics, they supplied definitely an element of karma yoga, compassion toward all beings. Yes, all good. But what about love of God? No, God is taken out of the equation. And Swami Vivekananda's analysis is people required it. One of the reasons for the demise of Buddhism in India was that they took this devotional aspect out of the way, even though, of course, in Buddhist countries, it is still there. And is there in a different form. Despite that, theoretically, Buddha was not a deity. Buddha was, according to his own account, a normal person who took many lives to get to this position of enlightenment. And there are many Buddhas. Buddha, just one of an enlightened buddhi, intellect. All right, that's fine. But statues are made of him. And you can say the statue is not a statue of a person, it's a statue of a principle, the principle of enlightenment. You can say that. But you see, the human need goes into a Buddhist temple. Prostrations are made. Pilgrimages are made toward that statue on their knees, so that the knees are raw and red. And each stop they will sit or they will kneel. And they will be always repeating the Buddhist mantra. And go on like that, go on like that. The human expression is always there underneath the surface. The need to bring out the emotion, the need to have an ideal somewhere and to personalize that ideal is a human need, even amongst those whose theological position does not encourage it, such as Islam and Judaism. Still, there's a personalization that is taking place. Can't avoid it. So this dualistic position does not mitigate against an essentially atheistic position of unity that we find in the Advaita philosophy or some sections of Buddhism or Jainism. Nevertheless, there's nothing to do with your ethical and moral behavior. And just saying, I don't believe in God, but I'm a good person, doesn't do it. Everybody should be a good person. That's just maintenance. That's all. But to go to something extra, to make an extra exploration with reasoning, with sincerity, with heartfelt love, even love for the goal to be achieved, that's what makes the difference. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right. So, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Merci beaucoup, Swami.
Ah, merci beaucoup. Bonne journée.
for joining.